Have you ever been lying in bed, exhausted, but your mind refuses to stop? You replay a conversation from earlier. Why did I say that? Did they think I sounded stupid? Maybe I should have answered differently. Then your mind jumps to tomorrow. What if something goes wrong? What if I make the wrong decision? What if I regret it? You tell yourself, stop thinking about it. But somehow, the more you try to stop, the more your mind keeps going. One thought becomes another. One possibility creates another. And before you know it, you've spent an hour worrying about something that hasn't even happened. Maybe you've experienced this at work. You send a message, then check your phone again and again, wondering why they haven't replied. Maybe you've made a simple decision, but instead of moving forward, you keep asking yourself whether you chose correctly. Maybe someone says something that sounds slightly different, and you spend the rest of the day wondering what they really meant. Nothing has actually happened. But inside your mind, you've already lived through 10 different versions of the future. And that's the exhausting part of overthinking. You're physically sitting in one moment, while your mind is living in hundreds of others. The past, the future, the conversation that already ended, the problem that hasn't happened, the mistake you might make, the rejection you might receive. And somewhere between all those thoughts, you lose the only moment you actually have, right now. But here's the question. Why does your mind keep doing this? Why does it keep searching for answers, even when there are no answers left to find? You might think you're overthinking because you're careful, because you want to make the right decision, because you want to avoid mistakes, because you want to protect yourself from getting hurt. And maybe that's partly true. But what if there's something deeper happening? What if your mind isn't trying to solve every problem? What if it's trying to protect you from uncertainty? Because uncertainty feels uncomfortable. You want to know what will happen. You want to know what people think. You want to know whether your decision is right. You want guarantees before you take the next step. But life doesn't give us guarantees. And the harder you try to control everything, the more your thoughts begin controlling you. In this journey, you'll discover why your mind keeps creating endless what-if questions, why thinking more doesn't always lead to better decisions, and how you can learn to respond to your thoughts without letting them decide your life. But first, you need to understand something important. The thoughts keeping you awake at night may not be trying to hurt you. They may be trying to protect you. And once you understand what your mind is really afraid of, you'll finally understand why you've been overthinking everything. Let's begin. Before we begin, I want you to make yourself a small promise. Don't listen to this story just to hear the answers. Listen while thinking about your own life. Think about that decision you've been avoiding, that conversation you keep replaying in your head, that message you keep analyzing, that future you keep worrying about, even though it hasn't happened yet. Because somewhere in these next chapters, you may recognize yourself. You may recognize the thoughts you never say out loud. The endless what if, the fear of making the wrong choice, the need to be completely certain before you move forward. And maybe you'll realize something important. Your mind isn't always trying to hurt you. Sometimes it's trying to protect you. It keeps analyzing because it wants to prevent mistakes. It keeps imagining every possible outcome because it wants you to feel prepared. It keeps asking questions because uncertainty feels dangerous. But there's a problem. The more you try to think your way into perfect certainty, the more questions you create. One thought becomes 5. 5 become 20. And suddenly, you're exhausted, but you still haven't made a decision. In Chapter 1, you'll discover why your mind can turn an ordinary thought into an endless cycle. Then we'll uncover the fear hiding underneath your overthinking, the need for certainty, the illusion that thinking more will always lead to better decisions. And finally, you'll learn how to respond when your mind simply refuses to be quiet. So don't judge yourself while you're listening. Don't think, "Why am I like this?" Just notice. Notice the thoughts that appear. Notice the situations your mind keeps returning to. Because, by the end of this journey, you may not be able to control every thought that enters your mind, but you can learn something far more powerful. You can decide which thoughts deserve your attention, and that decision can change the way you live. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? I'd genuinely love to know how far this message travels, and if this topic speaks to something you're experiencing. Like this video and subscribe. It helps me know that these conversations are useful and gives me a reason to create more videos like this. Now, take a breath. Forget everything else for a moment. And let's begin with the moment when thinking stops being helpful and starts becoming a prison. Chapter 1. When Thinking Becomes a Prison. Let me take you back to a moment you probably know well. You're lying in bed. The room is quiet. Your body is exhausted, but your mind refuses to sleep. You remember something you said earlier. At first, it's only one thought. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Then, another. Did they think I was being rude? Then, another. What if they don't like me anymore? And suddenly, you're replaying the entire conversation. You change your words. You imagine different answers. You create different endings. The conversation ended hours ago, but inside your mind, you're still there. Have you ever done that? Maybe it wasn't a conversation. Maybe it was a decision. You had two choices. You chose one, but instead of moving forward, your mind asked, what if the other choice was better? So you analyze it. You search for answers. You ask someone what they would do. Then you question yourself again and again until a simple decision feels impossible. That's the strange thing about overthinking. It often begins with something that sounds responsible. You want to make the right choice. You want to avoid mistakes. You want to protect yourself. You want to be prepared. But somewhere along the way, thinking stops helping you and starts exhausting you. You're no longer solving the problem. You're simply walking around the same question. Again, and again, and again. Your mind keeps searching because it believes the next thought will finally give you certainty. But what if certainty never comes? What if you're waiting for a level of confidence that life can never guarantee? Think about the price. You can spend an entire afternoon worrying about a conversation that lasted 5 minutes. You can spend days analyzing a decision that could have taken minutes. You can lose sleep over a future that hasn't even happened. And while you're busy thinking about life, life is still happening. The people you love are talking to you. Opportunities are passing. Your goals are waiting. Today is quietly becoming yesterday. And you may not even notice, because your mind is somewhere else. But listen carefully. You're not weak. You're not broken. And you don't need to force your mind to become completely silent. Your mind is doing what it learned to do. It's searching for certainty. Searching for safety. Searching for a way to guarantee that you won't make the wrong decision. And that's where the real problem begins. Because if you believe you must be certain before you act, you may keep thinking forever. You keep waiting. You keep asking, what if? But there's a deeper reason your mind is so afraid of getting things wrong. Something underneath the questions is asking, what am I afraid will happen if I stop thinking? And once you understand the fear behind your overthinking, you may finally understand why your mind has been working so hard to protect you. That's where our real journey begins. Chapter 2. The Fear Behind the Thoughts. Think about the last time you couldn't make a decision. Maybe you were choosing whether to take a new job, start something you've planned for months, send that message, or leave a situation that no longer feels right. You told yourself you were just thinking carefully. But deep down, you weren't only looking for the best choice. You were looking for a choice that couldn't hurt you. You wanted to know what would happen before you acted. Would you succeed? Would people understand? Would you regret it? Would everything work out? So you kept thinking, what if I fail? What if I choose wrong? What if I regret this later? And every answer created another question. That's because overthinking often isn't about the decision itself. It's about uncertainty. You want certainty because uncertainty feels uncomfortable. If you knew exactly what would happen tomorrow, you wouldn't have to worry tonight. If you knew exactly what someone thought about you, you wouldn't replay their words. If you knew your decision would succeed, you wouldn't hesitate. But life doesn't work that way. You can make the best decision you can and still not know what happens next. You can prepare carefully and still face something unexpected. So, your mind tries to create a solution. It imagines every possible outcome, the good one, the bad one, the worst one. Then another possibility appears, and another. Your brain whispers, keep thinking. Maybe you'll find a way to guarantee everything will be okay. But eventually, thinking becomes another form of fear. You're not preparing anymore. You're trying to eliminate uncertainty, and that's impossible. You're carrying problems that haven't happened. You're arguing with conversations that haven't occurred. You're preparing for rejection before anyone has rejected you. You're feeling the pain of a future that may never arrive. And while you're doing all of that, the present moment is quietly passing. Here's something important to remember. You don't need certainty to move forward. You need enough courage to take the next step. You can be nervous and still act. You can be uncertain and still decide. You can be afraid and still move. That's what confidence really looks like. Not knowing everything, but trusting yourself enough to handle whatever comes next. You don't need to predict every outcome. You need to trust that if something unexpected happens, you'll find a way to deal with it. But there's still a deeper question. Why does your mind believe that thinking about something repeatedly will make you safer? Why does it convince you that one more hour of analysis, one more conversation, or one more imagined scenario will finally give you control? Because there's an illusion hiding underneath your overthinking. And once you see it, you may realize that the thing you've been using to protect yourself has actually been keeping you stuck. We'll uncover that illusion in the next chapter. Chapter 3. The Illusion of Control. Have you ever thought that if you just think about something long enough, you'll finally figure it out? Maybe you've replayed a conversation 20 times, trying to understand what someone really meant. Maybe you've imagined every possible outcome before making a simple decision. Or maybe you've spent hours planning because you're afraid one unexpected problem could ruin everything. It feels like you're being careful. It feels like you're preparing. But sometimes, you're not preparing. You're trying to control something that cannot be controlled. Think about it. If you could predict every possible outcome, would you finally feel safe? Maybe for a moment. But then your mind would find another possibility. Another question. Another what if. That's because overthinking often creates the illusion that more thinking means more control. Your mind tells you, if I analyze this enough, I can prevent something bad from happening. So you keep analyzing. You check. You compare. You imagine. You prepare. But life doesn't work that way. You can make the best decision you can. And something unexpected can still happen. You can treat someone with kindness, and they can still misunderstand you. You can prepare carefully, and something can still go wrong. That's not failure. That's uncertainty. And uncertainty is something every human being has to live with. The problem begins when you demand certainty before allowing yourself to move forward. Because the more you try to control everything, the more powerless you can feel. You start believing that one wrong decision could destroy everything. One mistake, one conversation, one missed opportunity, one imperfect choice. So, you keep thinking, because thinking feels safer than acting. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes thinking is not protecting you from the future. It's preventing you from experiencing the present. While you're trying to predict tomorrow, you're missing today. While you're trying to avoid every mistake, you're avoiding opportunities to grow. And while you're trying to control how everything turns out, you forget that you don't need to control everything. You only need to control your response. Ask yourself, what is actually within my control? Your effort, your choices, your words, your actions, your attitude. But not everything else. You cannot control what people think. You cannot control what has already happened. You cannot control every outcome. And you certainly cannot control the future. So maybe peace doesn't come from knowing exactly what will happen. Maybe peace comes from knowing, whatever happens, I'll deal with it. That's a different kind of confidence. Not confidence that everything will go perfectly, but confidence that you can handle life when it doesn't. And once you understand that, you may finally stop asking, how can I make sure nothing goes wrong? And start asking, what can I do with what I have right now? Because that question changes everything. But there's still something deeper. Why does uncertainty feel so uncomfortable in the first place? Why does your mind keep demanding answers? The answer may be hiding inside one powerful emotion, fear. And in the next chapter, we'll uncover what your overthinking may actually be trying to protect you from. Chapter 4. You don't have to believe every thought. Think about what happens when a worrying thought enters your mind. Maybe you make a small mistake at work. Your mind immediately says, they're going to think I'm incompetent. Someone doesn't reply to your message. Your mind says, maybe they're upset with me. You wake up feeling uncertain about the future, and suddenly your mind starts creating an entire story. What if everything goes wrong? The thought appears, and before you realize it, you've accepted it as reality. But here's something important. A thought is not a fact. Your mind can create a possibility without that possibility ever becoming real. Someone not replying doesn't automatically mean they're angry. Making a mistake doesn't mean you're a failure. Feeling uncertain doesn't mean something bad is about to happen. And thinking you're not good enough doesn't make it true. So, what can you do when your mind starts overthinking? Don't fight the thought. Don't yell at yourself. Stop thinking. That usually creates another battle inside your head. Instead, pause. Notice the thought. Then ask, is this a fact or an assumption? That one question can create space between you and your thoughts. For example, instead of, I'm going to fail, try, I'm afraid I might fail. Notice the difference. The first sounds like a prediction. The second recognizes what it really is, a fear. Then ask, is there something I can do about this right now? If the answer is yes, take one small action. Send the message. Make the decision. Start the task. Have the conversation. You don't need to solve everything. Just take the next useful step. But what if there's nothing you can do? Then, continuing to think about it won't give you more control. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can say to yourself is, I can't control this right now, and I don't need to. Let the thought exist, without allowing it to control your behavior. This takes practice. Your mind may come back with another question, then another. That's okay. You don't have to win an argument with your thoughts. You simply have to stop following every thought wherever it takes you. Imagine standing beside a busy road. Cars are passing constantly. You don't have to chase every car. You can simply watch them go by. Your thoughts can be like that. Notice them, but don't climb into every one. And slowly, you'll discover something powerful. You don't need to control your mind perfectly. You need to become better at choosing what deserves your attention. Because your thoughts may visit you, but they don't have to become your decisions. And that brings us to the final question. What happens when you stop trying to eliminate every uncomfortable thought and start trusting yourself to handle whatever comes next? That is where overthinking begins to lose its power. And in the final chapter, we'll turn everything you've learned into a simple framework you can actually use when your mind starts racing again. Chapter 5. The Peace of Not Knowing. So now, you've seen what overthinking really does. It takes one small thought and turns it into 100 questions. It makes you search for certainty, when what you really need is trust. So what do you do when your mind starts racing again? Remember one simple word. Pause. Pause. Don't immediately react to the thought. Take a breath. Give yourself a few seconds before believing the story your mind is creating. Ask. Ask yourself, what am I actually afraid of? Not what might happen, but what are you really afraid of? Rejection? Failure? Embarrassment? Losing control? Sometimes the real fear is hiding underneath the endless questions. You understand. Separate what you know from what you're imagining. Ask, what are the facts and what am I assuming? This can completely change the way you see a situation. You might discover that the problem is real, but the disaster you've imagined isn't. Select. Now ask, what can I control right now? Maybe you can make a decision. Maybe you can have a conversation. Maybe you can take one small step. Focus there, not on everything that could happen, just on what is actually within your control. Execute. Do something small. Don't wait until you feel completely confident. Send the message. Start the task. Make the decision. Take the first step. And if there's nothing you can do right now, let it go for now. Not because you don't care, but because you've done what you can. And that's an important difference. You don't need to know how everything will turn out. You don't need to predict every possible problem. You don't need to solve tomorrow tonight. You only need to trust yourself enough to face tomorrow when it arrives. Think about how much of your life you've spent worrying about things that never happened. How many nights you lost sleep over possibilities that disappeared by morning. How many moments you missed because your mind was somewhere else. You can't get those moments back, but you can choose what happens next. The next time your mind asks, "What if everything goes wrong?" Try answering, "What if I handle it?" What if you don't know the answer? You'll learn. What if you make a mistake? You'll adjust. What if someone doesn't approve? You'll survive. What if the future doesn't go according to plan? You'll find another way. That's the kind of confidence you need. Not confidence that says, "Nothing will ever go wrong," but confidence that says, "Whatever happens, I'll deal with it." So tonight, if your mind starts replaying yesterday or worrying about tomorrow, come back to today. Take a breath. Look around you. You are here. This moment is real, and you don't have to solve your entire life tonight. You only need to take the next step, because sometimes the peace you've been searching for doesn't come from finding every answer. It comes from finally accepting that you don't need to know everything right now. Before you leave, take a moment and ask yourself, what is one thought you've been carrying that you need to let go of? Write it in the comments. You might be surprised how many people are feeling the same thing. And if this message helped you see your thoughts differently, like this video and subscribe to Mind Mastery Audiobook. Share it with a friend who is always overthinking, worrying, or struggling to make decisions. And don't go too far, because the next topic goes even deeper. Why you keep trying to control everything, and how to finally let go. Sometimes, the thing you're holding on to isn't giving you security. It's taking away your peace.